Vulnerable and orphaned children are often placed in care homes for shelter and security reasons. Most children live in care homes for many years without being reintegrated with their families. However, there has been concerns regarding long-term institutionalization of children, with intellectual and psychological development delays being prominent. On this week's edition of News in Depth, Macpherson Mukuka establishes the dangers of long-term institutionalization of children and the measures being put in place by various stakeholders to reduce the practice. I am your host, Chansakunda. Stay tuned.
I've been in an institution of care at Home of Joy for 8 years, and I've experienced a lot. I've seen a lot of different things, and we have learned a lot.
She recounts her 8-year-long experience in a care home. At age 6, Martha, not her real name, became orphaned. She lost both her parents in circumstances she can hardly remember. The little she can remember is that none of her parents' relatives was willing to take her and her siblings in. She recalls that an elderly member of the family took custody of her and her siblings. Now aged 15, she however has no clue of her siblings' whereabouts. Later, Martha ended up being in one of the care facilities for vulnerable children in Lusaka. Many young children are placed in institutional care facilities throughout Zambia for different social and legal reasons. An institution or residential care home for children is a group living arrangement for more than 10 children without parents or foster parents, in which care is provided by a much smaller number of volunteer or paid adult carers. Like Martha, these children innocently playing amongst themselves and unconcerned with what life has to offer at this tender age are victims of different social injustices.
These are children who are victims of child marriage, abandoned children, victims of sexual violence, talk about school dropout, talk about issues of adolescence crisis, talk about children who are just here. It all started like peer pressure. And then things can't just be handled. Lack of employment. Some families cannot just support their children because they don't have food at home. They don't have clothing.
We rescue these children in need of care, and we have nurses around and the caregivers and mothers to just take care of them, and the social workers also to do the assessments of these kids as they come in from the government. So they would come through different areas like hospitals, clinics, sometimes even just picked by Good Samaritans.
Since the early 1990s, care homes operating as orphanages became common in the country, mainly with sponsorship from the church. Some institutional homes like Alliance for Children Everywhere, formerly House of Moses, were formed by well-wishers and families from Europe. Over the years, there has been an influx of such facilities, accommodating hundreds of vulnerable and orphaned children across the country. However, what was thought to be a way out for the orphans and vulnerable children has now become a source of concern in the development of the affected children.
We have seen that most of the people, from studies and from experiences of people that have been working with these children, you'll see that there have been a lot of challenges such as developmental milestones. If, for example, a child has gone into an institution whilst he was too young and they keep that child for a long period of time, that is a disadvantage. So they will have difficulties in, they will have delayed, milestones in terms of development. Two, you would find that they will have difficulties in, forming or maintaining relationships with, the general public once they are, given an opportunity to reintegrate.
Life in institutional care is governed by a regimented routine, which results in children following a prescribed daily schedule. A fixed timetable is usually imposed and children are processed in groups without consideration for privacy or individuality. Martha recounts how hard it has been to follow such a structured schedule.
You find that at home you wake up maybe 05:30, and in a facility you can get to, you wake up around 04 hours. You need to do the chores, You need to bath before you enter in the kitchen. You need to take care of yourself. You clean the surroundings. You go and pray. You need to make sure that you follow the timetable at the facility. But at home, when you're there, maybe if they say 05:30, you will maybe sometimes you can even wake up 6 hours because there'll be no one to start. This one has done this, maybe they'll punish them because in the facility it's very different that the people who take care of us children in there, they give rules and they make sure that if you don't follow the rules, they punish.
Institutional care is further characterized by a one-size-fits-all approach, in which the same service is provided to all children irrespective of their age, gender, abilities, and needs. The service provision is depersonalized, and strict routines are followed to enable a small number of staff to deliver basic services. This occurs despite wide recognition that institutional care is associated with negative consequences for children's development.
The setup is not like a home setup. We have one dormitory where they sleep. The time for cleaning is done at the same time. The time for feeding is done at the same time. At home, you can reserve some food in the fridge. You can keep some food because you know this food should be eaten by a particular person. But then if 10 children say they are not eating, they are not having breakfast at the same time with the rest of other children, how do you preserve the food?
Besides being residential facilities, one of the most frequently cited characteristics of institutional care is its size. This means the number of places available for children in any given facility is limited. It is believed that the larger the setting, the fewer the chances to guarantee individualized care for children in a family-like environment, and the higher the chances for certain dynamics to appear. In most child care homes, the ratio is 1 carer to 6 children of a similar age during the day and fewer staff at night.
When I talk of a home, it's different from a house, quite all right. But the balanced thought is almost like we're talking about the same stuff, but in a diverse way. In one way or the other, you find that in a home, it's places where there's established, it's an establishment where you find the motherly love, the fatherly love, the grandchild love, that kind of fatherhood is actually happening as compared just to merely a house where individuals are just running around with distorted views.
This is like a clinic. We prescribe this. Has it worked? We go back to our fora, which we call case management. Our council, what did they observe? The house mother, what is their observation? And the other people, how do we embrace this? Who are the other stakeholders do we bring on board? Oh yes, maybe the children, because of COVID-19, they've been in isolation for too long. Can we take them out for recreation so that the energy can come out?
Young children in institutional care are more likely to suffer from poor health, physical underdevelopment, delayed cognitive development, and emotional attachment disorders. Consequently, these children tend to have reduced intellectual, social and behavioral abilities compared with those growing up in a normal family home.
Or the 4-year-old who is from a facility and the 2-year-old who is from home, the 2-year-old will behave like is older or she's older in the way they play, the way they all the activities, and just even the communication itself. Because if you look at the children that are growing up in facilities, many of them, they have all these delays in terms of development.
They are slow to learn certain things. When they go to school, the chances of them thriving better than other friends who have not gone to institutions are more as compared to those that are institutionalized. Then because of that, even as they grow later in life, they will have a lot of challenges, especially challenges such as it is very difficult for them because their behaviors also are not going to be as conducive as the other children.
In institutional care, the delivery of care and protection is inadequate. This is evident in children who experience delays in their emotional and physical development, among other things. This exposes children to be at a heightened risk of developing challenging behaviors and being victims of emotional, physical, and sometimes sexual abuse. To prevent children from being victims within the facilities, a laid-down standard of care is provided for each facility to follow.
We have what is called minimum standards of care, how these institutions should be managed. We have juvenile inspectors that come through to inspect, talk to the children. They come in with, there's a form that juvenile inspectors from Department of Social Welfare come in. They don't give us notice when they are coming in. So there are regular visits, to ensure that, children are not being abused.
The inadequate ratio of carers to children and the nature of their interaction is typical of most care homes. Children usually experience multiple caregivers throughout their stay and even on a daily basis. The instability and insufficiency of caregiving deprives the child of the opportunity to form a healthy attachment with a significant adult, which in turn leads to attachment disorders and difficulties with a wide variety of social relationships in later life.
The ideal situation is that children should be reintegrated back to society. The more you keep them, you institutionalize them. It's like you are making these children to be rigid. Remember, when you are in an institution, the child won't be alone. They will always be in groups. So once they are in group, they will continue doing the things that they are being taught. And this is why we have a lot of bullies coming out of these places. So for me, as an institution, it will be important that after these children, maybe that's why I've given that at least maximum of 13 months or 12 months, they need to transition going into other facilities that should be able to help them.
It has been observed that institutional care facilities fail to support strong and meaningful relationships between children, their parents and siblings, and the wider family. From the evidence gathered, it came out clearly that some of these children in institutional care are orphans who have relatives, yet they have very little or no connections with their relatives and communities.
You can find that in other facilities, they say maybe in December you can go for 2 weeks to go and visit. Then maybe you don't know anyone. So it's better that maybe they introduce us to one of them, either your sister, your uncle, auntie, or anyone, even your grandmother. Because when you go, maybe that you have gone for a holiday, even 2 weeks, maybe 5 days, you can get to know along. They could tell you about stories of your parents and the reason why you went there.
Another notable challenge in these facilities is social isolation. In most cases, children are usually kept in closed up and isolated environment. However, not all hope is lost. Things are slowly changing. Institutions are finally identifying family members related to a number of these orphaned children.
They miss their families. They miss their communities where they are coming from. So sometimes they are homesick and it's difficult to tell. And each one needs a personal attention and care. So it's the whole lot. You talk about resource mobilization and the whole lot. You need to trace these families. You need to know for those who are sick, they are on treatment. You need to know everything is happening, at the right time and the right place.
We are trying to bring this back to the minds of the people, inculcate them, reach to their sets of understanding, to say God initially had set a family as number one thing, number one school, number one college, number one everything you can talk about. But over and above that, you should bring together a united family. When you have a united family, you have a united society, united church, united nation.
For Alliance for Children Everywhere, adoption and fostering is the new normal. The facility no longer keeps children for more than 6 months. The age has also been reduced to 5 years, and only in extreme cases that a child over 5 remains in the facility.
Currently, we have 2 transit homes, which is a House of Moses. As popularly known, actually, it's a House of Moses, where we keep the young ones 2 and below years old, and we have Bill and Betty Bryant. It's across in Avondale, where we keep the 2-year-olds all the way to about, it's supposed to be to 5 years old, but circumstances sometimes don't allow, and we hit 7, 8, sometimes even 10 years old.
Adoption is regarded as a practice associated with the Western world. In Zambia, very few families or individuals will openly talk about adoption. However, this is also changing and is becoming a solution to reducing institutionalization of children. Our interaction with Alliance for Children Everywhere led us to a young couple whose love for children made them adopt a child before having their biological one.
We just wanted to be parents, and for us, it didn't matter how we became parents. So for us, it's just one way of becoming a parent. So the inspiration to adopt is parenting, love for all children in whatever direction they come from.
The interest came in when, you see, when you start visiting orphanages, particularly myself, it was my first time when I was visiting the orphanages, I realized that these children needed parents, mother figures, father figures, and being in an institution was not ideal for them because they were obviously maybe overcrowded. And from that point, we started having an interest to say maybe we should consider adopting a child.
The couple also shared how their respective families received the news to adopt a child.
There was nothing sinister. I think the only questions they had was where was the child coming from, how old they were, what's the process like. They were very, very supportive. It wasn't something weird for them.
Encouraging families around the country to consider adoption is a big component of those heading institutional homes and their stakeholders.
Can we talk about fostering? Can we promote these things so that people get to know how these interventions can be done, so that institutions of care should be the last resort?
There are children out there that you can adopt. We call that foster parents. That's foster parenting, where you can come on board and just grab them, and then with the passion to say you legally take this child as yours.
But Mrs. Nkosi feels the negative public perception and ignorance about the practice has caused many families to shun adoption.
If they understood that this is a form of parenting, just a route through which a child enters a home, I think it's a very light issue to embrace if you look at it in that way.
In addition to the perceived ignorance, the process involved in adopting a child or children is long and cumbersome, causing many to give up along the way. However, Alliance for Children Everywhere is of the view that the process is necessary for both the child and those wishing to adopt.
There's a lot involved in reintegration. It's not a one-day activity. It takes long. Sometimes it can take a year, it can take months, it can take 2 years, because we need to prepare the families. We need to assess those homes to make sure that we establish the reasons as to why the child, was separated or removed from that family.
Bearing in mind the requirements the whole process subject the applicants to before a committal order is finally issued, patience becomes a virtue. Mrs. Nkosi likens the 1 year wait to the time a pregnant woman endures to the point of giving birth.
In the adoption circles, this is what we call it's labor for us. From the time that you apply till the time that the child comes, it's a really long labor. So yes, there are times that you get frustrated.
The Alliance for Children Everywhere is happy that the number of families applying to adopt children has steadily increased over the past 5 years.
From 2015 to date, we have almost trained 400, foster to adopt families, and the number of children are being adopted. And even today, calls are coming, and families are being referred to us for training. Just 2 weeks ago, we're training over 45 families who are going into the process of foster care and adoption.
For the Nkosis, there is no greater dream or desire in their adult life than to raise a child. Having adopted one, they automatically became parents. The couple's plans for their first bundle of joy are immense.
We want her to go to the best schools that we can afford, for her to experience the best life experiences, to travel the world.
We want her to grow up and have all the basic needs that a child needs to get from a parent. Okay, so in this case, maybe we could talk about education, health, and we just want to raise her like any other child. We're just normal parents like any other parents here in this country or in the world.
Across the world, institutional care is the only mechanism available for vulnerable and orphaned children to have access to shelter and other social amenities. However, The challenges that come with such facilities have a bearing on their social integration. This is why it has been now revised that a child must only be in a care home as a transitional process to a family unit. The stay should not be more than a year. Adoption is the only way which can be given to orphaned and vulnerable children in order for them to experience family love and a connectivity they might not have experienced before.
This is where we come to the end of this week's edition of News in Depth, where we have been looking at the dangers of long-term institutionalization of children and the measures being put in place by various stakeholders to reduce the practice. I have been your host, Chansakunda. Be sure to join us for another edition next week. Do have a prosperous Merry Christmas and a New Year.